How mature are enterprises today in adopting human-in-the-loop AI models, and what capability gaps do you constantly observe in the shared services industry?
Sure. From a maturity perspective, specifically to human-in-the-loop AI, I would say the maturity is still uneven, but definitely accelerating, right? So we do see that uh, a lot of AI, and I'm going to say AI as a whole, okay, because it's all the same in a sense. Um, but specifically talking about, say, agentic AI, we still see that it's kind of implemented in silos, not necessarily a full-blown agentic automation is in place, and definitely not with an aspect of uh, human overview, right? So it's still in the nascent stages. Of course, there are many challenges which have been spoken about earlier, may it be data fragmented systems. So I don't want to touch upon that. I think enough is said about it. But what I'll probably talk about is the enterprise readiness to enable human-in-the-loop AI, right? I think three facets, and I'm sure the speakers earlier have also covered it, but I can break it down. So first being readiness from a perspective of process readiness, right? Uh, because today's processes as we know it are quite siloed and are linear in nature, right? You know in terms of what you're supposed to do and not do. And the same might not work in an environment where you have agentic, right? I think because there is going to be a whole lot of cross-pollination, if I can say that. And as it was touched upon earlier as well, you can't implement agentic AI or AI in silos, you might not get the full value out of it. It has to be implemented across the full value chain of your enterprise. I'm not going to even limit it to finance, but the whole enterprise, right? So that's where the true value will come, right? And unless you kind of redesign these processes, take into account how the future processes are going to look like, don't try to force fit the current processes with agentic AI. So that's one. Secondly, it's about workforce. Again, I think Shiva also touched upon it, right? You have to relook at the workforce you have. You don't want doers anymore, right? You need someone with greater skills. And when I say greater skills, maybe that's contextual, right? Of course, techno-functional role is what we hear. Contextual knowledge is what we hear, because the role will change from doers to, maybe supervising AI, okay? Or potentially, I don't know. I'm just saying it, maybe prompt engineering. So whatever those possibilities are. But the role's definitely going to change, and I think Emagia providers as such, I think you will be able to define in terms of what the roles looks like in the future and help enterprises, with that role. Uh, Thirdly, most importantly, I think there's always discussion about responsible AI, and that kind of brings in the aspect of governance and trust, right? Unless you have the right governance in place, it's going to be challenging to implement AI. You got to have the right uh, guardrails. Again, I think touched upon earlier was from a traceability, auditability. You need to be able to audit what the agents are doing. Okay, you need to have the right controls, ensure that the agents have limited access, right? Like governance works in today's business anyway. So to sum it up, I would say technology alone will not help enterprises get the value. It's going to be equal parts of operating model, uh, re-looking at the whole operating model, and secondly the talent. Right? I think that also needs to be given enough thought.
Whether from an autonomous AI in shared services, are these centralized? Are these federated? Are these hybrid models? How are they being implemented? What's the trend looking like right now? How do you think it's going to go in the next 2 years? Just from a global perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, each of these models has its own advantages and say disadvantages, right? So, for example, when you say a centralized operating model, I think that works really well when you're in a regulated industry like some BFSI, farm, or healthcare or pharma, right? Where everything is controlled because it's regulated. You need to have those guardrails. I think what it does is kind of curbs the innovation that is, the potential of innovation. Um, which was the other one? Sorry, you said?
Federated and
Federated,
hybrid.
yeah. So,
amongst the three
federated, again, I
models.
think what it refers to is, I think where it all lies with, say, the business units, right? I think the shots are taken, or for example, even from a AI agentic development can happen at a business unit level, right? It's got its advantages because there is contextual knowledge that is at that business unit level. But again, what that leads to is, while you have a lot of freedom to develop solutions, uh, but then I think it also leads to more of fragmented solutions, a lot of duplication, of solutions that are kind of built, right? So that's a disadvantage. So what this leads to is, I think hybrid is a perfect combination where you have more of a controlled autonomy, right? So from a platform perspective or a governance perspective, everything is centralized. But at the same time, you have the ability to innovate. So I would say, yeah, it has to be hybrid as a way forward.
Changes in standards or governance frameworks uh, as far as AI operations are concerned? I know it's still early days, still early stages, but when you talk to your customers or some of the rest of the analyst community, are you seeing something in this space?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is definitely focused on ensuring that there is a AI governance. Everyone understands the importance having an AI governance, right? Um, is there a global standard for governance? I don't think so. Of course, there are a lot of governance models out there. Um, and yeah, everyone understands the whole responsible AI piece, having uh, you know, uh, uh, the governance model to ensure that they have a safe and secured, operations, right? They're covered. May that be regulatory or, enterprise focus. So no, there is nothing centralized as such, but there's a lot of discussion around it. While I'm definitely not an expert on, what governance should look like, but typically what we see is covered as part of these governance models and are very basic. Right? I think governance models, the fundamentals remain the same. Probably the controls will change. Right? You got to have, you need to know, what kind of controls you want to give the agent, right? So the access control is going to be one of those areas. Okay, AI, what would change is, and I think someone touched upon that earlier as well, you have to kind of keep looking at your models so that they don't drift or there are no errors, right? It's like you retrain your employees, right? I think somewhere you have to ensure that the agents are also getting retrained and probably recertified as well, right? The other aspects you can think of is ensuring that you have a clear segregation of duties. What is the AI going to do? Okay, what's a human going to do? I think who's going to approve? What's that whole process going to look like? Then of course there's this ethics part, compliance. So I think these are elements that we typically hear are discussed from a governance perspective. Too early right now, but I think it definitely go the way route of maybe a cloud, ready or a SOX ready kind of organization. Maybe we'll have a AI ready
It's
organization
still
at one
early
point.
days. At some
Early
point,
days, yeah. I think what's
yeah, I agree. I
possible.
agree.